This is season 3 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. I'm your host, Kathleen Dames, and over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit basic cable together. An awesome worsted weight cabled pullover. Hello, my friends, and welcome to season 3, episode 8 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Today on basic cable, we are going to split stitches apart and then join them back together. And what do we mean by that? Well, so we've been making these tubes, which are very easy, fun to make, but at a certain point we need to turn those tubes into an actual sweater. And for that we need to set aside some stitches for each underarm, and that means we're splitting apart the front and the back stitches on the body and the underarm from the rest of the sleeve. We'll call them the shoulder stitches on the sleeves. So in the pattern, I have you do that at the end of each section, so the end of the body and the end of each sleeve. You can also, when I knit something, sometimes I just put everything aside on one big piece of waste yarn, like so, as you've seen already when we've been talking about premium cable here. So it's on one big piece of waste yarn. And what I decided to do then is I marked with some stitch markers. These are the removable kind, they're like safety pins. And I marked where the underarm stitches begin and end. And I did the same thing on the sleeves. And I'm gonna leave my waste yarn in the entire thing because it's, it's some simple acrylic and it won't really get in the way. And then the nice thing about that is if you're worried that you may have to like rip it back, redo the yoke or something, just leave that yarn in there. It shouldn't really distort the stitches too much. If you're worried, try using a thinner yarn, something like a crochet cotton, and leave the yarn in there, and then everything is there just in case you need to pull back to that point. All your stitches will already be held. It's kind of like a lifeline. So I've got my needle here, my nice long circular needle, and I've got my sleeves, and they are also set up for business. They've got their stitch markers here for the underarms, and I'm going to join everything together, and we'll see how we're going to turn those 3 tubes into one bigger tube. And that's essentially what's happening, right? We're putting the sleeves on each side of the body, and we're making one bigger tube, and we're going to be decreasing that, and that's what's going to make our yoke. So we're going to start with the needle, and there are 2 ways you can join everything together. Let me say that first. You can slide everything onto one needle without doing any stitch work, without worrying at all about working yarn, or you can knit those stitches on. That's easier to do if you've held everything on, spare needles. When it's on waste yarn, I find it's really easy to put everything on the needle first and then work your round. So I'm going to begin here. Actually, first of all, Jane is going to hold on to, Jane's going to hold on to the body and the other sleeve. And I'm going to begin putting my needle through the stitches on sleeve number 1. And so we're going to start back here, okay? And we're going to come around on sleeve 1. Then we're going to go across the front, sleeve 2, and then around all the way back to complete the circle. And so those sets of underarm stitches, they should match up. You should have one set from the sleeve matched to one side of the body, and the same thing on the other side. It's all very parallel. And by taking those stitches out for the underarms, that's how we can turn 3 circles into 1. They're really more ovals, but we'll call them circles. Okay, so I'm just going to go around and slip all these stitches onto the needle. And for this one, because I'm going to be doing a saddle shoulder yoke, so I will be doing my yoke a little bit differently next time, but the same principles apply in that we are going to be decreasing stitches as we go along to shape the body and shape this, shape the yoke, I should say. We're going to shape the body stitches and the sleeve stitches into the yoke. And if you look at your basic t-shirt or whatever, you can understand that we are Ah, there we go. Okay. Jane, I'm sorry. That you can see, and this is a raglan too. This is the thistle leaf pullover. Jane decided she wanted to dress up a little today, so I said I would wear basic cable. But it's the same principle here, even though this is lacy and slightly different. We're still doing a raglan. The raglan stitch itself is a little different, but the same principle applies, and it applies really to any seamless sweater. You start the same way for all of them, and then you do slightly different shaping in the yoke to create the different styles. And as I said, I'm going to be doing a saddle shoulder to bring that cable up onto my shoulder, but the raglan is great too, and that's what we did for basic cable. It's really it's a nice straightforward shaping, especially if you're new to sweater knitting. I find it's a slightly less intimidating method of shaping the yoke. So that's why we're doing it on basic cable. So I'm still working my way around my sleeve. Let me do a little spin on Jane here. Sorry for the squeak. So again, we're going to start here at the back corner, right? I call it a corner. And we're going to go around the sleeve. And that's what I'm doing now. And we're going to come here and here. Actually, probably if I lift the sleeve up, you can understand a little bit better what we're doing here. So these are the underarm stitches, and right above it, actually right here, is where that sleeve is right now. And then we'll go across the front. And you'll need to put in some markers, and I mentioned that in the pattern too. And you'll want to mark the raglan lines. And for basic cable, we do the decreases on both sides of a point. So you're going to put your stitch marker in between stitches. On something like thistle leaf, where we use the centered double decrease, and it's a very much more delicate decrease, then I have you put a removable stitch marker into a stitch, and you can move it up every so often. So that you're always decreasing on that stitch, and that becomes the center stitch of your centered double decrease. All right, I'm almost done with sleeve one here. Maybe through the magic of video editing, we'll speed this all up later on. But there we go. I have reached my marker. Okay. So now everything is back on the needle, and you could have even left your second sleeve if you did sleeve, body sleeve. You could have left your second sleeve on your needle and just proceeded from there. Okay, so we've got the sleeve, right? And coming out of the far end of the sleeve, we're going to start joining. And here you can see I've got the needle here, and I'm matching up. Turn this sideways. These are the underarm stitches here. I've matched them up, okay? And now we're going to do the front, and we're gonna slip this needle in across the front over to, there it is. There's the other stitch marker. So that's going to get us halfway around. Come here, needle. This is the one I want. All right. And so you're going to want we're holding our work with right side towards us. Gets a little awkward here. I usually do this sitting down because in my lap, then everything can just sort of sit there, but that's okay. All right, and I'm just sliding my needle in across the front. I'm checking that, because I'm doing single row stripes, that everything is the same color, because we're going to begin with the alternate color and continue on our merry way, remaining in our pattern. And that goes really just for the stripes. Otherwise, you don't really have to worry. But it does help if you can. Now, I wasn't able to do that, of course, because my cable pattern is a little longer. But if you can get your cable pattern on the body and the sleeves to end at the same point, obviously your sleeves will be longer, unless you're doing 3/4 sleeves. And that's a nice thing about 3/4 sleeves, is that they are basically the same length as the body. So I can't really show. Jane is wearing thistle leaf, which is 3/4 sleeve. And so then everything can just end at the same time. All right, and so we're working our way across the front. I think I'm going to fast forward this part for you. So it's really easy. This is not as scary as you might think. And hopefully it all makes sense now what we are doing to get everything onto one needle to finish things up. Because of course our yoke, our shoulders become smaller than the sum of our arms and body. And that's what we need to do. We need to decrease away stitches to make it fit around. All right, I'm feeling the stitch marker. I'm very close. Okay, so now I have got, ta-da, sleeve, front, and now we're going to add on our second sleeve. And again, you want to make sure that you are matching up those marked or held underarm stitches. If you've already put them on their own little piece of waist yarn, that's great. It kind of makes it even easier. So that's definitely, there's nothing wrong with that. The way I'm working on this sweater now, it made sense to have everything on its own big piece of waist yarn. Okay, and so once these are matched up, then you begin at the next stitch and slip those on. If you are having waist yarn in there, try not to snag it because you don't want it to get caught up in the stitches, or you'll have to sort of trim it out afterwards. Ask me how I know. Okay, so we're gonna get our second sleeve on, and then basically we just have to slip the back stitches on and we are ready to go again. And that is another nice thing about this, is that it sets you up for the next step very easily. Okay. I think I'll be fast forwarding this part as well, because it's a little boring to look at, but I hope it all makes sense for you, that we get everything in this one big circle. And I think that's the best way to think about it, is that we need to form one big circle out of three. The neat thing about this style of knitting is once you've got everything, you've got your held underarm stitches and you've got everything joined up, you really can choose any of a number of different yoke styles. I highly recommend checking out Elizabeth Zimmerman's knitting workshop or knitting around. They are both really great resources for seamless sweaters and the different yoke styles that you can create. And the circular yoke is probably the most straightforward, but it's kind of, I like it for certain designs. It works out perfectly, but it can be a little simple in terms of how carefully you're shaping the sweater to the shoulders. So if you were looking for something that more closely fits and sort of mimics, say, a shirt, you're going to want to go with one of the, maybe one of the hybrid yokes. The saddle shoulder is a lot of fun, especially if you have some sort of detail that you'd like to bring up from the sleeve onto the shoulder. Okay, now I have the sleeves, the front. Well, I'm gonna make sure things aren't tangled, and that is a little something I think it's, but you can see, can you see there? But now we're ready to do the back stitches. Okay, and that's all that's left to get everything together. So again, we're gonna find the first stitch after the marker or after your held stitches if you've put them on waist yarn or a stitch holder. And I will say that I really do prefer waist yarn. I find it's very flexible and it does allow you to sort of try on your sweater if you want to do that. And I find especially the first few rounds when we start the yoke, you'll see the first few rounds you kind of, it's a little tough going around the circle, especially at the underarm spots, because those stitches are getting a little stretched out. Those first and last stitches of the body and sleeves get a little stretched out, but it's less so if you are using some waste yarn. So rather than the rigid stitch holders, which tend to look like a giant safety pin, I just find that waste yarn works better because knitting is flexible and stretchy, and so it's best to use something that is also flexible and stretchy. Okay, and just a little bit more and I will have everything on one needle, which is the goal. You've worked so hard, you've made it through Sleeve Island, and now you're ready for your reward, right? And you can see, right, there's the sleeve kind of stretched out, and here is where the underarms will be. And we deal with these in the finishing work. We're going to Kitchener those together. Kitchenering is a type of weaving that actually creates an additional row of stitches. And as I was talking about the stitch holders, it's the same thing for finishing off the underarms. Some people like to do a 3-needle bind off. Some people have been known to bind off those stitches and then sew them together, but I find that those are too rigid. And the great thing about Kitchener is it's creating another row of that flexible, stretchy fabric. That is what knitted fabric is all about. So definitely, if you haven't Kitchener before, I'll go through all the steps. I'll try and show you in close-up. I've done it in previous seasons, so if you are working ahead, best to go back and watch the finishing episodes of either season 1 or season 2. They will help you immensely. And the thing is, once you get Kitchenering, I feel it's kind of like riding a bike. In fact, I finished off a sweater last night that I'd tucked away for a while because I had other things I had to work on. And it's like, oh, all I need to do is Kitchener the underarms and weave in some ends and I'll have a sweater. What took me so long? So, and I sat down and I did the Kitchener without really thinking about it. But that's because I've done it so many times. I mean, you see all those sweaters, right? Each one of them, I think without fail, each one of them has Kitchener stitch underarms. It really is, it's smooth and flexible, and it's definitely the best way to go. Okay, so woohoo, I've got everything on one needle. And I'm back at I call it the back corner over here. So this is where I'm going to join things in the round. I'm going to place my row counter. I really find the row counter style of stitch marker for the end of the round to be very helpful, especially in something like this where I need to keep track of what row I'm on. And I am going to need to make some notes to myself because I'm on different rows for my sleeve cable and my body cable. And that's just kind of the way it goes. Luckily, it's not for too long. I'll have a lot going on. So the yoke is just a time where I'm going to be paying attention to everything. The yoke is not your time for mindless knitting. Sorry, it's just not. It's really the time to pay attention. So, so there, everything is on one needle. And now I'm going to be able to join in my Au Naturel yarn, my white yarn, because I've been doing a scrimshaw row. Okay, so I just put premium cable on Jane. I thought this might be a helpful visual for you. This needle is at its max capacity here as we're stretched out around the body. And that, of course, is the thing when you're knitting, you can squunch everything up on the needle and use a slightly smaller needle. So here is where we started, right? This is sleeve 1, and this is also a great example. You can see how far stretched out these underarm stitches are right now because they're sort of helping out the needle. So again, I really recommend using waste yarn instead of a stitch holder. But of course, you are the boss of your knitting. If you like the stitch holder, go for it. Not everybody is trying to shove their sweater onto a mannequin. Okay, so sleeve 1 here, right? Around, around, around. This is where we have joined up the body and the sleeve. We come across the front here, and you can see what I also meant to point out is this is, right, Jane doesn't have arms. Sorry, Jane. But this is her underarm here, okay? So everything is right at that line. It should be just above the bust, sort of on the top of the bust. We go across the front. We go around. This is the sleeve of the second side, and the sleeve underarm stitches and body underarm stitches are next to each other. They're going to hang out on some waste yarn and wait to be joined together at the end. Some people do also try joining those together. They'll kitchen them right away so that they can try on the sweater if they need to make adjustments to the yoke. If you have special shoulders, if you have small shoulders, or you have even broader shoulders, you may need to make some adjustments. And so if you've kitchenered it right away, you can try it on more easily because you don't have this sort of flapping thing here at the underarm when you do try it on. Also, when you cast off, you only have to weave in ends. So you have just eliminated some more finishing work. So the more work you can do as you go along, the better it might be for you. I don't mind kitchenering, like I said. I don't mind waiting till the end, but your mileage may vary. Okay, so we've got sleeve 2 here, and you can see there's the needle peeking through, as it should be, because I haven't actually used any yarn yet in the joining. And then we go across the back, and here, oh, they're just barely hanging on to the needle, the back stitches, and finishing everything up. And so that's our circle, right? Thank you, Jane, for being so helpful, but that is our circle. And then you can just join in the yarn and start following the yoke instructions. If you have a sort of a longer neck, longer yoke section, you may want to do a few rows of knitting without doing any of the yoke shaping to start, or if you want a slightly more generous fit. I tend to like my yokes to be a little closer to the body, so I don't include as much of that myself. Okay, so I hope that helps too. Okay, so now everything is all on the one needle, right? And you can see that big circle. Woohoo! See one big circle. It's got these couple little lines here. I really have to figure out a better way to display this, but I think you get the idea. Here we go. Okay, see, we're going to go around the sleeve on the front, around the other sleeve there, across the back, and that's going to be where your change of round is. So that back corner, I really do think it's the best spot for that, and it kind of hides it a little. You know, we start off with it here on the side, and then we just put it on that back corner. So I'm all but ready to yoke it up. So that will be our next episode, where we will talk about our yoke shaping and anything else that comes up with finishing up the shaping for the top of the sweater. So that'll be episode 9, very exciting. If you have any questions before then, be sure to ask them. Ravelry forums here on YouTube if you're watching, reply to an email, because of course you get my email newsletter. If you don't, sign up at kathleendames.com/thesweater. And I think that's everything for this week. I hope that made sense. It seems kind of intimidating until you actually do it, I think. And if you make sure that you keep your underarms together and you create that circle, you will be all set to finish off your sweater. Until next time, thank you so much for being here, and happy knitting. Mwah! Bye! This is season 3 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit basic cable together. Many thanks to Jen at Spirit Trail Fiberworks, Corinna at Picnic Knits, Tara Swiger and my fellow Starship Captains, and you for being part of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Don't forget to visit kathleendames.com/thesweater to sign up for the newsletter. Just not a joiner? Purchase your copy of Basic Cable from my Ravelry shop anytime. Be sure to share your progress on social media with the hashtags BasicCable and KDSweater. Questions? Comments? Visit the Kathleen Dames Design Ravelry forum today. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy knitting!